Despite the immense impact on people and society due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we must acknowledge and bring forth the positive changes, especially for education, digital, and entrepreneurship. Here are my big ideas in these fields. 1. Blurring the line between teacher and student. At the start of the pandemic, when teachers were scouring around to quickly learn how to conduct the class remotely, the students often had to show them how to unmute themselves, share their screen, or post the class assignment on platforms such as Microsoft Teams or Google Classroom. In countries where teachers had near authoritarian powers, the changing times dethroned them. Sometimes the students were teaching and the teachers were learning. The concept of being an eternal learner focuses on unlearning and lifelong learning. Upgrading skills has been put back in the forefront. 2. True blended learning, the future of education. Conducting classes in the traditional classroom style does not harness the true potential of blended learning. Just using a virtual whiteboard instead of the blackboard in the classroom or delivering content in the same manner is not enough. With online classes, the possibility of using blended learning approach is immense. It gives students the opportunity to take control of their own learning. It also gives teachers the opportunity to innovate and present their subject in an interesting manner. The time spent in the traditional classroom can be used more productively. As teachers and students have been learning online, they both are realizing its potential. The pandemic has moved online learning beyond the pilot phase to widespread adoption and implementation. Now, the lessons learned from the early days are being applied, which will allow true blended learning to be the de facto education technique. 3. Rethink physical spaces in schools. Organizations are likely to adopt the 3-2-2 work week suggested by Ashley Williams, professor of Harvard Business School, which is 3 days at the workplace, 2 days remote, and 2 days rest. Schools might not be far behind to embrace it, fostering true blended learning. This will open up the possibility for rethinking the use of the physical classrooms, canteens, gyms, playgrounds, and labs in the schools. The time spent at the school can be used for application of learning, creating projects, building stuff, showing what has been built, sharing learnings, and less time spent on learning about a topic via lectures. The traditional classroom layout, as we saw before, the teacher's desk up in front of the blackboard and all the students' chairs arranged in theatre style, will change. We can envisage more a banquet style with round tables, with equipment and tools that allow to build things. Classrooms will become more like a maker space. This will enable the physical classroom to become the innovation hub and incubator of applied learning. 4. Spotlight on EdTech. Venture capitalists poured funding into EdTech startups as COVID-19 completely revolutionized the market. VC investments almost tripled from $310 million USD a year ago to $998 million USD from January to July 2020. EdTech was the most funded sector in the year 2020. We all know about White Hat Junior's sale to Byju's for $300 million USD. Similar deals have brought the spotlight on education. These encompass not only education itself, but education enabling technologies. Examples are collaboration platforms like Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, education content providers and their apps, and even hardware like laptops and tablets. All the teens who were getting by with their mobile phones for researching and submitting their homework pre-COVID realized that it would not suffice for online learning. So, parents had to invest in devices for the children when schools were not able to provide them. This brings us to my next point. Point 5. Policies required to lessen the digital divide. The pandemic made it imperative to continue distance learning behind a screen. Having a device with internet became a necessity. With this came an increase in the digital divide. It highlighted cases of students committing suicide like Aishwarya of Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi, which prompted the Women in Tech organization to initiate a laptop funding drive for students at that college who couldn't afford it. Thankfully, they were successful in raising the funds. There were several other such examples of grassroots level movements which were initiated to help bridge the digital divide. Wi-Fi is like oxygen now, and connecting to the world to learn through a device is a necessity. Governments and policymakers need to formulate and implement policies that will speed up the process of bridging the gap of the digital divide. Point 6. STEM and entrepreneurship are the skills of the future. Each decade has its share of most sought after skills or profession of the future. The pandemic has shown the world that STEM skills are timeless. Scientists, technology specialists, engineers and mathematicians all working on aspects of COVID to either come up with models to predict the spread or prevention methods or technology solutions to combat it were clearly the professionals to look up to. Everyone has been watching the progress of vaccines or tracking whether the new virtual background feature has been enabled or looking for the app which allows home delivery of essentials for vulnerable groups. The importance of learning coding skills from a young age as well was highlighted during these times. With loss of jobs during the pandemic and redefinition of essentials, entrepreneurship has taken a prominent position. The spirit of the people to take upon themselves to start something that will solve a problem of society and help them sustain themselves has risen. This skill must be introduced to children in schools too. Point 7. Geography is history. I remember this quote from the time the internet was getting adopted by the general public. As it became possible to access things from a different region and the physical location of where one lived did not matter, so geography became history. Taking a plane and going somewhere is no longer an option now. With more remote jobs available and access to learning from anywhere in the world, the quote has got more significance now than ever before. One direct outcome would be that the meaning of student exchange programs will change. It no longer will mean that a student from America physically comes to Europe for a semester to learn certain subjects at a partner university. The universities can redefine the student exchange program. It can now involve more students as the barrier of cost is no longer the prevalent factor. Teacher exchange program and moving beyond borders for both teachers and students will truly harness the power of the global village we live in. Point 8. Health at the front line. The pandemic has shown us that health has to be put on the spearhead. Growing sales of immunity boosters and alternative medicine, offers of psychologists and professionals in the space of mental health are an indication of this trend. Educators, teachers, students are all expected to focus on health above all else, both physical and mental. Yoga or exercise breaks that focus on physical and mental well-being are here to stay in the education domain as well. There has been a strong drive to continue physical education lessons virtually or with safety measures in schools. Increasing the staff of not only health and hygiene workers but mental health care specialists within the school staff has been a noticeable shift. Point 9. Growing respect for the teacher community. Innovative teachers keeping the primary school students engaged with puppets and funny sounds are the most watched videos on social media. Headlines were made with the teacher who wrote outside the village school walls, where children could sit physically distant and continue to learn. Our teachers and educators are the new influencers. After just a few weeks of homeschooling, parents have gone on record to say that they now realize how hard a teacher's job is. There is a growing respect for the teaching profession, and Guru Devo Bhava, meaning teacher is God, is getting widely accepted. Point 10. Schools must redefine the value provided. Following the pandemic, there has been an outcry of parents asking the schools to lower the fees in some countries like India. On the one hand, schools have been challenged with fixed costs of vacant physical spaces plus investments in cloud spaces to conduct classes. They additionally face the challenge of navigating the steep learning curve of its teachers. On the other hand, parents felt that the education provided has not been equivalent to what the child gets in a physical school. Parents had to be there with the child during online class, plus they are not using, within quotes, the school building. So why should they continue to pay for the building fund, which is part of the school fees? This is a time for schools to redefine the value they provide to their customers, the parents. To conclude, the lines between teacher and student are blurring. Students can display their technical prowess and help their teachers. The adoption of true blended learning will continue to prevail and cause the rethinking of physical school spaces. Education and enabling technology being in the spotlight is bound to increase the digital divide. Policies to bridge that digital divide are key. Highlighting the importance and encouraging STEM and entrepreneurship skill for students should be a focus. Geography is history, and the global village that we live in will continue to get closer knit. Health will be at the front line. The respect for the teaching community will grow, and schools must redefine their value proposition. The pandemic has shown us who the real heroes are. Not the great-looking models or impeccably dressed film stars, but those tired people in uniform or PPE kits with swollen faces relentlessly carrying out their duty as healthcare professionals, supermarket staff, cleaning workers, and teachers.